welcome to episode 114 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. I'm your host, Annabelle Bateman. This is the second last one before Christmas. We'll have one more episode in 2 weeks' time. And then over the Christmas break, December, January, you get to go and listen to all those little episodes that you have not got around to listening to yet. So 114, there'll be 115 episodes. So I'm sure there'll be some you might want to go back and re-listen to or listen to over your holiday period. Or perhaps if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and you don't have a long holiday period, well, you still can use that as a chance to catch up on some older episodes. So I'll be back in early 2024 with more on the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. But for today, we're talking about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is a pretty common gut health problem for not just people with thyroid conditions, but certainly there is a connection in with sometimes hyperthyroidism as well, which is what I'm diving into with Yundt Coles, also known as the SIBO Coach in this episode. Jen is an AFMC certified functional medicine practitioner, certified integrative nutritional health coach, certified acupressure practitioner. She is not only a hydrogen sulfide SIBO survivor, she's got her own SIBO story and a thyroid story as well. She's highly trained, world-renowned expert in her field. Her passion is rooted in decades of long-suffering, self-healing journey. She loves to support those who feel stuck in a revolving door of infection. She's a mother of 2 active and creative teenagers. She's currently based in Sacramento and enjoys practicing Tai Chi. Playing guitar is her stress relief, sanity, creative endeavor. She's a writer, home renovator, and on a personal and professional mission to live a life with more energy, clarity, and real joy. So I hope you find this conversation helpful. Stick around at the end for your KISS Thyroid coaching segment, and we will do a little bit of reflecting and give you some action steps to take. All right, well, welcome Yundt Coles to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, here to talk all about exciting things like bacteria in our gut. SIBO is the topic of our conversation today, and I'm really thrilled to have you here. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, look, well, we had a bit of a pre-chat a couple of weeks ago, so I already know from the get-go that we're going to have lots of really interesting conversation today because we've already, sort of began that conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to diving into this because it's such a difficult thing, isn't it? SIBO is such a bugbear for people that suffer with it, which is a lot of people with Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions. So
Exactly. Yeah, we're gonna dive in and get a little get into the nitty-gritty of it. They're so connected, and I think it's going to be a really important message for your audience.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in then. And so most people working in these sort of spaces have had their own health journeys to get us to this point of wanting to help others. So has that been your journey too, Jen? Like, can you share a little bit about your health journey that's got you to wanting to help others with SIBO?
Yeah. So I've had a lifelong journey of dealing with digestive issues myself. Started as a child into my teens. And then once I was married, even just having the anxiety of using the bathroom while my husband was in the house, right? Things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I had my babies back to back and was under a lot of stress. Ended up being in a car accident, on and on. I'm also love to renovate homes. So I've been exposed to mold and toxic,
Mhm.
metals and things like that in that process. Obviously now I'm learning to be a little more careful as I do those projects, but a real lifelong ebb and flow of health and not so health, right? And I think eventually at one point, I ended up studying Chinese medicine. So I did that for a little while. And that was kind of my intro to the alternative world of, medicine and trying to get some pain relief and doing that sort of thing. But really just continued to deal with digestive issues no matter what I did. Conventional medicine was really kind of failing me in that way. Here's some Metamucil, take some Miralax, you might be dairy intolerant, but how about you take some Mylanta or some, lactate and not really like addressing the root cause of what my actual problems were. And so After a health crisis several years ago, I ended up with broken heart syndrome because my body was under so much stress.
Wow.
That led me
That
to my
sounds
first taste
terrible.
of, yeah,
Mm.
very scary.
I don't, okay, broken heart syndrome. I haven't, that just sounds very sad.
Yeah, it's
Sounds
very
awful.
similar.
Yeah.
You actually have all the symptoms of having a heart attack,
Ah.
and some damage can be caused to your heart muscle. And so
Mm.
it's really, really important to dial in your stress and start managing
Mm.
that going forward so you don't have another episode.
Mhm.
But really, I was going to say that that kind of led me to my first taste of functional medicine. And during that journey with that practitioner is when I found out about SIBO. I had never heard about it before. In the past, I'd always gotten that generic, diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And so it's kind of a catch all and it doesn't really tell you anything.
Yeah, we don't know what you've
um,
got. You've got problems. You've got IBS.
yep,
Yeah.
yep, exactly. And so, so that, that journey with that practitioner, that functional medicine practitioner was so eye-opening and really inspiring to
Mm.
me. I decided to go back to school, be a health coach, and then dove into functional medicine school as well. And eventually word got out that I was helping others with SIBO after I helped myself. And so here I am now as finally the SIBO coach. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a wild ride.
yeah. But that's the thing, isn't it? When we've worked out how much we can do to help ourselves, you just want to share. You don't want other people to suffer in the same ways. And
Exactly.
so if we can share and other people can learn faster, then,
Yeah.
all the then I think our struggles and our challenges that's the good that's come out of them. I'm not saying they're good, but there is good that comes out of bad
Yes.
things. And so,
Of
yeah.
course. Yeah. There is that silver lining, being able to help others, inspire,
Mm,
empower them,
mm,
educate them on your experience, but also the things you learn in clinic and things like that. So it's been a real blessing. I'm really grateful. Obviously, I don't wish this kind of a journey on anyone, but those are the types that are coming to me at this point, right? For help. And I'm glad we're going to be talking a little bit about thyroid today because I have my own thyroid story to share, but I see that a
mm,
lot in my practice.
mm.
And learning a bit more about your journey as well with your thyroid.
Yeah,
Suboptimal thyroid function is really rampant right now, and it's important to talk about.
yeah. I was reading something the other day. I should remember these statistics. I'm not very good on the details, but it was something like 80% of people surveyed had some sort of hypothyroid problem. I'm like, can't be 80%. No, I shouldn't even say it because I should get my facts right before I start quoting statistics that aren't right. But anyway, the long and the short of it was a lot more than I had thought. I'll have to see
Yeah.
if I can find it now. I've said it, but huge numbers, huge numbers. I mean, we know it's well, at least Hashimoto is the most common autoimmune disease in the world. So, um, that gives
Yeah,
some
in my
indication,
practice, I
doesn't it, of
like
how
to s
much is going on?
yeah, I like to say that Hashimoto's is kind of the gateway autoimmune. I
Woohoo!
kind of feel like,
Yeah.
yeah, once somebody kind of, starts out with Hashimoto's, I see a higher risk of developing other types of autoimmunity, right? So
Mm,
it's really important to keep asking questions. I mean, you know the story, and I'm sure your guests on the show talk about it a lot, but just going to your practitioner and they only want to test TSH and
mhm.
everything is fine,
Yeah,
right? And to just really encouraging your audience and your listeners to find someone who's going to listen to you, right?
yeah.
That's really the huge message that I like to share with people is to you are
Mm,
your own advocate. Just keep pushing and pressing and asking until you find the right person to help you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So
Yeah.
tell us your thyroid story then in amongst this SIBO journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So my mom has Hashimoto's and it's always been kind of on my radar.
Mm,
But I've been, I'm always the one freezing.
uh-huh. You're the cold
I'm
fish.
always cold and, my hair was starting to fall out. I mean, I know I had these gut issues. It's all really connected and we can talk about that. But, um, getting to the point where I was just having bad fatigue and chronic constipation and all these sort of symptoms, and just really like, I don't know, probably 2 decades of going to my medical practitioner and only having TSH or even sometimes T4 if I tested, and everything kind of came back within range. And I just have this vivid memory of several years ago. I was having a phone call with my doctor, and she said, "Well, I only test TSH. I don't know how to read the other panels." And I was trying to explain to her that I know how to read the panels, so can't we just order the lab work? Right?
Yeah,
I ended up
you order it,
ordering it for
I'll
myself
interpret
anyway.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I ended up ordering it all for myself anyway because I have that
Mhm.
ability to do, obviously, as a practitioner. But then, I went to the endocrinologist and they do like the ultrasound and all this kind of stuff. And I had a video call with that endocrinologist, and I just remember being in my office, like, and sitting at my desk. My feet were freezing. I had a coat on. It was 90 degrees outside. I live in California. It was quite warm. Um, I had a bald spot on my head. I was so frustrated. I felt like this woman was not listening to my concerns, right? And finally, I just kind of broke down and cried right in front of her on the video, which is
Mm,
not really my personality, but I was just so desperate for her to hear me, that I felt strongly that I had some hypothyroid, symptoms and presentation, and that I was just begging her to help me. And she
mm,
just said, "I'm sorry, I don't really know what to suggest to you because your TSH is fine." And this was the endocrinologist who's supposed to be a specialist, right? And it was such
mm,
a disservice to me. That was really motivation to me to
mm,
figure out, one, okay, I really got to fix my gut now. And two, how can I really optimize my absorption of these minerals
mm.
that I need for my thyroid function?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a
Mm,
really big turning point for me as far as holistic health goes.
yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
did you have the antibodies? Like, have you got Hashimoto's?
I did have some antibodies, but I've been able to lower those. So that's
Yay.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, because it so does, there's that family connection, isn't there? So it was already on your
Yeah.
radar, which is really good.
Yeah. And
And
actually,
hopefully, yeah.
interestingly, what she said to me, what I took away from that conversation too, is she said to me, "Oh, you don't need to worry about it, Jen. Everybody has antibodies." And I just thought to myself, I don't agree with that. And I need to find
Mm,
someone else, or I need to do my own research to figure out how to do
mm,
this, right?
yeah.
It was kind of that moment too where I felt like, wow, this is really going to be up to me to figure out. And that can feel overwhelming sometimes, but really it's our power, especially as women. Sometimes we don't get heard at the doctor's office as much as a male might, but it's a really important message for us to kind of remember. We have the power to figure that out for ourselves. We can heal ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think when we're in the depth of maybe in the process of being diagnosed, and maybe when things aren't, really when you're not managing it well, so you're not feeling good, you just want someone to tell you what to do. You just want someone, you want that doctor to take on some of that responsibility, because in the end, like, you can be feeling so miserable and flat. You're just like, oh, I can't deal with another thing. And so that whole desire for, you know, well, says that, yes, we need to take responsibility, but there are points in time in our health journey where we just don't feel like we can. And wouldn't it be great if, if
Yeah.
our health practitioner could just take a bit of that load or pressure off us, saying, yeah, there is a problem and this is how you're going to deal with it. And it's not going to be quick, but you can do something about it, so it's okay. You'll get
Yeah.
there one step at a time. You don't have to do everything all at once, but you do have to do some things, and here are some things you can do. I mean,
Hmm.
what a different message than, oh, right, I know there's something wrong. You, the specialist, can't seem to help me. Now I'm going to have to figure it all out, which in the long term, we get to that point, don't we? I
Yeah.
have to be my own advocate. no one else cares for my health like I do have to take the action. But there are points in your journey where you're just not feeling good, that there's just like another blow. And it's so, I think if you're listening and that's you and you're feeling like down in the pits, Jen and I are here to say we'll be
Yes.
that voice for you. It's
Yeah.
okay. You'll get there. There are some things you need to do, but one step at a time and you'll get there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
100%. I agree with that. I mean, isn't it just nice when you do meet someone who's just going to listen to you, who sees you, who appreciates who you are as a person and not,
Mhm.
a number on their list or someone on their schedule, and can really show you step by step. Okay, this is the first thing we're going to do. And then this is the second thing. And it's going to take a little effort, but I know you can do it. We all kind of need that cheerleader in our
Yeah, we
court,
do.
right? And
Absolutely, we do. Yeah,
somebody
absolutely.
who can guide us. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, I think both are important. Both are important, just being our own advocate, but also just being able to find the support that we need. It's such a blessing when we do find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive into SIBO then. Even what is it? There are probably people listening thinking, SIBO, what's SIBO? I feel like I've heard about it, but what does it mean? So what is SIBO?
Yeah, great question. So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And essentially what it means is just that, your small intestines is really what we like to call the sorter or the secretary. It's where we absorb our nutrients and further break down foods, right? And we don't necessarily want any fermenting going on in the small intestine. So it's not sterile, but it's mostly a sterile environment. Whereas the colon, the large bowel, has the majority of our bacteria, our microbiome there, that is, further breaking down fibers and carbohydrates and things like that and fermenting those things. And that's all normal. What's abnormal is when that's happening inside the small intestines. And when that is
Mm-hmm.
happening, that is reducing or impairing our ability to digest our foods properly and absorb the nutrients. And so there can be many, many downstream effects of not getting key nutrients, right? And we can talk a little bit about that too. But essentially, that's what small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is. Yeah.
Mm.
And studies show that a good majority of folks who are given the diagnosis of IBS actually have SIBO, and that's causing the symptoms that they're having, things like bloating and gas, diarrhea, constipation, and there's a whole host of other outside of sort of digestive issues like rashes or brain fog or fibromyalgia type
Mm-hmm.
symptoms. So it comes with a lot.
Yeah. So how do you distinguish that then, like from, well, maybe someone's been told they've got IBS, or they've just got leaky gut, or they know they've got digestive issues. How do you know if you've got SIBO, and how do you distinguish that from other gut related issues?
Yeah. Yeah. So, one way, just kind of anecdotally, you can see that if certain types of food, which we consider like FODMAP foods or like cruciferous foods, for example, cause bloating, an hour or two after you've eaten in that lower abdomen underneath the belly button, that's a really big sign. But mostly we test. So, we take a
Mm-hmm.
SIBO breath test, it's a 3-hour lactulose breath test. There is another one on the market that is called Trio Smart. I don't use that one in my practice very often. Um, but the 3-hour lactulose breath test is going to give you information about your levels of different gases being produced in the small intestine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so those gases are indicative of, do bacteria give off gases, and that's how
Exactly.
right. Okay.
Hmm.
So if you've got a certain amount of, gas, then that's indicative that
Yeah.
you've got too
Yeah.
much
So that's
bacteria.
a good point. That's a good point. So the breath test is measuring. So, say you still have some bacteria in your small intestines and it's fermenting food, and it's creating gas. That gas is being released through the lungs, and that's being captured in the breath test. Now, you can do a
Mm-hmm.
stool test, but remember, a stool test is capturing what's going on in a moment in time in the large bowel. That
Mhm.
information doesn't necessarily give you a quote unquote diagnosis for SIBO, but there could be some clues in there about types of bacteria that you have in your stool that may be an indication of what's going on in the small intestine. So we can kind of make some assumptions there with that information as well.
Okay. And so you said, I mean, obviously it's coming out in the breath. Do you have, I mean, things like reflux or burping, belching, that kind of, like, is that connected into SIBO too, or are they different?
Yeah. Yeah, so that can be a side effect or a symptom rather of
Mhm.
SIBO because if you have so much bloating going on in the lower abdomen, it could be pushing upwards and causing pressure. You can get some acid reflux or GERD or things like that, some nausea.
Mhm.
But again, I often see H. pylori infection in the stomach, also,
Mm.
coexisting at the same time
Mhm.
as SIBO. So it's good to kind of have if that's a concern, you can look at, having an H. pylori test. And I'll also just kind of go on another tangent here. If you have SIBO, it's likely you're not able to absorb key nutrients. And one of those things might be magnesium.
Uh-huh.
Magnesium is key for controlling that valve between your stomach and your esophagus. So if you
Uh-huh.
don't have enough magnesium, that flap can be loose and then cause things like acid reflux or I would say, allow acid reflux to happen. So lots of things going on there connected.
Mm.
And yeah, it takes some time to kind of sort out. We have to do health histories, ask lots of questions, and do some
Mhm.
testing.
Yeah, so you can't just self-diagnose yourself with SIBO.
I know that there are many people that do.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's important to kind of, test, not guess.
Yeah.
And because if it's not SIBO, then it must be something else, and we have to figure out what
Mm.
that is.
Mm. And I suppose if you self-diagnose and then self-treat it and it's not, then you're treating things in the wrong way.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
might get
Exactly.
lucky with some you might get some
Yeah.
luck or some relief, but you're not actually dealing with the root cause. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And to
Mm.
tie this kind of back into thyroid health, I
Mm.
mean, so say you start off with some hypothyroid symptoms or some hypothyroid function, right? And we say in functional medicine, if you have a sluggish thyroid, you could have a sluggish anything else.
Yeah.
So that could
Everything's
be,
sluggish.
yeah,
Sluggish thyroid,
sluggish
everything's
brain,
sluggish.
right?
Yeah.
Sluggish sex hormone production, sluggish energy, sluggish, digestion and motility, right? So
Yeah.
you could have some hypothyroid function and then have that lead to things like constipation and then perhaps an overgrowth of bacteria. So that's one way that hypothyroid could have sort of lead to something like SIBO.
Mm. Mhm.
And interestingly, I saw a study recently. It was from 2017, so a little while ago. But it was saying that actually some of the things like Synthroid, the study showed that actually that was giving you a 3 times higher risk of developing SIBO, which I thought was super interesting
Wow.
because you would think it would be opposite, right?
Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
think that the medication would help you. So really something interesting to think about, like if you are on Synthroid
Mm.
and suddenly having more digestive symptoms to investigate that.
Did they say
Uh,
why, or do you remember why? What?
Yeah, so they're still doing some more studies on that, but it is affecting motility. Like I said, to me, intuitively, I would think it would be opposite, right? It seems
Well,
like
it's
it
supposed to
would,
be improving things, improving your
right? It's
thyroid
supposed to
function,
be
which would improve
improving.
motility and all of that. Yeah, you'd think
Yes,
so.
exactly. So that's why I thought the study
Hmm.
was really interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but what I was going to say was, so on the opposite direction, we have say you have SIBO, right? Maybe you got a bout of food poisoning and ended up with SIBO, or you had a surgery and things are kind of, physiologically different in your small intestines, and now you're more apt to getting it, or maybe you're just under a ton of stress and that's how you got SIBO, right?
Hmm.
Um, Again, like I said earlier, we're suddenly now having this inflammation and impairment of absorption of key nutrients that are needed for proper thyroid support, including the conversion of T4 to T3. So you could end up with a situation where you have this digestive issue going on first and then develop hypothyroidism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's kind of a forward feeding cycle, because then perhaps now you have sluggish digestion
Mm-hmm.
and motility, and it kind of just keeps going. And so that's
Yeah.
why I see chronic SIBO relapse in my practice, is when there's a hypothyroid dynamic that's often at play for people.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's both a symptom and a cause. Or it could be,
exactly.
and that will vary from person to person as to whether that,
Exactly.
yeah, it's the chicken and egg thing, which came first.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And to speak to that too, on the opposite side of hypothyroidism, for hyper, if you're running higher, you could possibly be affecting your digestive tract in the way that it's over modal, right? I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And, your stool is rushing through as diarrhea and causing inflammation and dysbiosis and things like that. So,
Mm.
both cases of, suboptimal thyroid
Yeah.
function can lead to SIBO.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do if you've got SIBO?
Yeah. So if you do get a positive test, there are several things you can do to help mitigate some of the symptoms. So that would be things like perhaps reducing some FODMAP foods for a short term. Now
Can
I
you just
say that
tell
with
us
a
what FODMAP
caveat.
foods are? Yeah.
Yeah, FODMAP foods are things like cruciferous vegetables, for instance, like broccoli and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Those things are quite high in FODMAPs.
Mm-hmm.
Other things like sugar alcohols that you should avoid. A lot of people are eating quote unquote sugar-free foods these
Uh-huh.
days,
Mm-hmm.
and those have been shown to feed bacteria in the small intestines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Also, if you have an yeast overgrowth or, Candida,
Mm-hmm.
Candida creates a really interesting matrix biofilm in the intestinal tract. And bacteria like to hang out in there. It's very comfortable. It's a cushy scene for them to hang out. So lots of times we'll see those co-infections. But so diet can kind of give you some relief from symptoms pretty quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not what I would call a cure, right? What we want to
Mm-hmm.
do is rebalance that microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that means that we have to use things like antibiotics or herbal antimicrobials.
Mm-hmm.
It also means addressing your immune system, because for some reason you were tolerating this infection in your small intestines, and it's really important to boost your immune system so that
Mm.
it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
And managing stress is huge. I talk about this a lot in my practice. Stress, just when we're stressed, we're in fight or flight. And when we're in that mode, we're not digesting, we're not sleeping, we're not resting, we're not healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my tough love conversations I have to have with folks. Like, hey, if you want to finally get over this because you keep relapsing, we need to start talking about your stress levels.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and there's a multifactorial approach. Now, in the conventional medicine world, the approach is 2 weeks of rifaximin.
What is that,
That's
an
an
antibiotic?
antibiotic.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's an antibiotic, and it's localized in the small intestines. It's not considered a systemic
Oh, yeah. Yep.
antibiotic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's the conventional approach, but it's really just missing many of these things, like I just mentioned, the preparation of your body before using the antibiotics, and
Mm.
then things to do afterwards, like using prokinetics and encouraging motility so that it doesn't grow back. And of course, rebuilding and repairing, using probiotics and things like that afterwards.
Yeah. So there's a process. There's like killing off the bad bacteria, replenishing with what is the good bacteria or whatever's meant to be in the small intestine, and then
Yeah.
there's a maintenance sort of period. Is that
Yeah, I mean, mostly
right?
that's right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't
I know
like
it's
to
probably
use
not
the
nearly as
word.
linear and nice and neat as
No, no,
that,
no.
but in general terms, you've got to get rid of the bad before you can bring in the new. Like you've got to actually go
Yeah,
through a.
so there's a lot of different approaches to that, actually,
Okay. All
Annabelle.
right.
So
Okay.
there's different schools of thought. Some
Mm-hmm.
practitioners out there will say take spore-based probiotics, and that's how you get rid of SIBO. I don't see that being super effective in my practice. Usually what I'll do is take out fermented foods and probiotics in the beginning to reduce the bacteria load in general, because that's part of the issue is there's too much bacteria. And then, we slowly rebuild and slowly reintroduce fermented foods and let the body do its thing. I mean, your body innately has the ability to heal itself. You just need to give it the tools in the right time.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
what about things? I have a feeling. I know someone who. I'll just ask the question. What about essential oils? Like, are you to some people? I think some people will treat those bacteria with essential oils. Are you familiar with that as one of the options?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question because I'm not an essential oil expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not having people ingest essential oils, but I do
Mm-hmm.
use them in my practice in different ways. So things like thyme and oregano, we know are antibacterial, antiviral,
Mm-hmm.
antifungal. We can use those things in, you know, uh, what do you call them?
Diffuser.
Vaporizers or
Yeah. Yeah.
diffusers,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And rubbing on the abdomen with some castor oil, even
Mm-hmm.
on the bottom of your feet. I also love lemon balm and lemongrass.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll have folks, use those topically, but also just drinking the tea. So, like if they want to get the
Yeah.
actual herb and drink the tea, can be
Mm-hmm.
quite healing, especially for those that are constipated.
Uh-huh.
So there is definitely a place for using essential oils and herbs like
Mm.
that for
Mm.
healing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking. I think when my mum went through SIBO, I'm sure she used some oregano, and I was talking to someone else who's looking at some of those options. So yeah, there's probably, like anything, lots of different approaches, and um,
Yeah.
everyone has their
Oregano is
favorite
quite
way of. Yeah,
powerful.
it's very
Yeah,
powerful, isn't it?
oregano is
Yeah.
one of my favorites, but not everyone
Mm.
can tolerate it because it's quite strong.
It's
So,
strong.
it just depends on the person.
I remember reading something ages ago about making thyme tea as well. Like, you just put the thyme herb in
Yeah.
hot water, basically. And so, I mean, again, that would be a more gentle way of using thyme, and getting it
Yes.
into your system if you didn't want to use the essential oils. So, yeah, I love that there's lots of natural. These are all these sort of natural herbal um, options as well, that you don't
Yeah.
have to go down the antibiotic path if you don't want to, or you can try, you probably try some of these more natural pathways first and then see if that works. Is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
sounds like there's lots of different
Yeah, well, like
options.
I'm not a prescriber, so I'm not
Yeah.
writing prescriptions for folks. I mean, some of my
Mhm.
clients will say, "Hey, I'd rather go the antibiotic route because they feel
Mhm.
like it's easier." But
Yep.
in my practice, I have quite a toolbox of different herbs and nutrients that we
Mm.
use. And that's usually my kind of first response. I'm kind of more of an alternative thinking
Yeah.
type of practitioner. And I
Mhm.
find that people who come to my practice are also on that same wavelength. So, I
Yeah.
mean, nature is amazing. And there's so many healing powers in plant
Mm.
foods and herbs and things like that. Why not take advantage of those things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so it's a combination between trying to treat, treat, and then remove some foods and then reintroduce.
Yep.
Yeah. So how long? I mean, it's probably like, again, how long's a piece of string? But I mean, how long does it usually take someone to be able to move through that process and get back to a good gut health?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because gosh, so people are so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I usually see folks kind of go through this methodical step by step of like supporting the immune system, stress management, addressing biofilm, addressing the overgrowth, then rebuilding and healing the gut lining and reintroducing food, including fermented foods to rebalance that microbiome, using things like prokinetics and really kind of sticking to some lifestyle changes. That takes time, right? You don't,
Mm.
I mean, human beings, we might try something new for a week and then we're on to the next thing, right? So those lifestyle changes kind of take a while. I'd say 6 months to a year is probably typical for most people to really
Mhm.
overcome and then be in a good place on the other side. So
Yeah.
it's not
Okay.
overnight. And
No.
I know there are people out there who say, oh, you can get rid of SIBO in 4 weeks and then be back to normal. That's really rare,
Yeah.
at least for
Yeah.
what I see in my practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. So, got a couple of questions actually. You've mentioned prokinetics a couple of times, and I don't know what they are. Can you explain what they
Oh,
are?
yeah. Yeah, so prokinetics are an agent that are encouraging peristalsis or like a contraction in the colon, right? So think about it this way. It's like taking out the trash. We have this cleansing wave of muscular action going on in the intestinal tract,
Mhm.
and prokinetics can encourage that. So it's really kind of a nervous system issue.
Uh-huh.
And so remember, if we have sluggish thyroid, we may have sluggish nervous system reaction in the
Mhm.
large colon. Well, even in the small intestines as well. But um, yeah, so prokinetics can be encouraging for that. It's that cleansing wave to sweep through the trash at the end of the day, right? To make sure that we have
Mhm.
a clean system. And sometimes when we've had ongoing infection and or a hypothyroid response in the body
Mhm.
for quite some time, that nervous system in the gut kind of turns off a little bit. And so it needs a little bit of
Mm.
stimulation. The
Okay.
goal really is not to always be on those forever, but some folks need to stay on them for long term because of whatever physiological issues they have, or maybe they
Mhm.
haven't, started to manage their stress, or they're still dealing with hypothyroid symptoms, etc.
Mhm.
So they're really an important part of overcoming SIBO that's missing in the conventional approach.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just hadn't. So it's a supplement of sort of, it's something
Yeah.
it's a
So, yeah,
supplement.
there
Yeah.
are pharmaceutical versions that you can
Okay.
get a prescription for. They have
Mhm.
some side effects,
Uh-huh.
but there are many herbals that you can use, like
Mm.
ginger and artichoke, and
Okay.
things like B6. Vitamin B6 is very
Uh-huh.
helpful,
Uh-huh.
and things like that.
Mhm.
So it just depends on the person and
Yeah.
what would make the most sense for their unique body.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And that's where these things is always good, always best to, well, like we said before, you can't really, not a good idea to self-diagnose SIBO and probably trying to manage it. It's a trickier thing. It's not just a general overhaul of your gut health. It's quite a specific thing that you're dealing with. So you would
Yeah.
really be best off working with a practitioner that knows about how to treat
Yeah,
it, manage
yeah,
it, yeah,
exactly. Well,
overcome
I
it.
mean, I
Yeah.
was going to say this earlier too. I've had folks come to me who have, we're all on Dr. Google trying to figure out how to help
Hmm.
ourselves, right? And so
Yeah, of
someone comes
course. Yeah.
along and they say, I want to go on the low FODMAP diet. And they come to me and it's been like years that they've been on this restricted diet where they're eating 5 foods, right? This is really detrimental to any
Mm.
healing journey because you need lots of nutrients in order to heal your body, right? And so having such a restricted diet for so long is not a good idea. So when I
Mm.
talk to my clients about, let's try this XYZ diet that I think might be good for you, I'm thinking about it as a food guideline and not really like a restrictive diet
Mhm.
to get some symptom relief, but it's really never a long-term plan, right? The long-term plan is to diversify food variety and have food freedom. I mean, we all, end up with these like food anxieties after a while after being on these restricted diets, right? And
Mm. Mm.
I know you're a big fan of the anti-inflammatory diet. That can be very soothing and healing for someone who has SIBO and
Mhm.
thyroid issues. So I do like that food guideline as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So if you well, while we're talking about foods, like, and so the goal ultimately is to end up, well, I mean, we all want to be eating as much variety as we can, as our individual bodies can tolerate.
Mhm.
But are there any foods that you just shouldn't, like if you've had SIBO and you don't want it to recur? Like, are there foods that can trigger it that you're best off just avoiding, or it really is a case by case scenario?
Yeah, I mean that's important because, well, obviously everyone's going to be different, right?
Yeah.
So for me personally, like I was never able to start eating cauliflower again. Cauliflower is
Hmm.
just a trigger for me. We all have our
Okay.
things, some
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
unique that way. But I would say, generally speaking, the goal is to have a variety of all types of foods, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, reducing sugar intake is always a good idea.
Yeah.
Gluten can often be a trigger for people, even if you're not celiac. I'm sure you talk a lot about gluten in your with
Hmm.
your audience here and thyroid and everything, but we know that gluten can really impair those tight junctions in the intestinal tract and wreak havoc there, and lead to downstream autoimmunity and things like that. You know, in addition to causing gut issues.
Hmm.
Um, so gluten, I would say reducing sugar, right? Just eating natural sugars, having a few servings of fruit here and there and that kind of thing. But the idea is to eat the rainbow and to have
Yeah.
small amounts of fermented food every once in a while. So you're getting that natural probiotic effect.
Hmm.
Um, Reducing alcohol consumption because that's impairing the liver and your ability to detoxify, right? So
Hmm.
anything that's
Yeah.
overgrowing in there and releasing toxins
Yeah.
gets kind of stuck in the liver.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say those are probably
The
the
key.
top ones. I mean, if you
Yeah.
know you have a dairy intolerance, just avoid dairy, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, that's where it's probably those things are going to be different. But from a SIBO perspective, that'd be the main kind of things to be alert
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Does
there is a
coffee?
small part of the population of SIBO who get SIBO really easily because of a bout of food poisoning. Say they had food poisoning
Ah,
10 years ago, they got really sick at that time and then slowly developed SIBO. They've been dealing with this on and off and taking antibiotics, this sort of thing. Those folks are really susceptible to getting food poisoning again and having
ah,
SIBO. There's just a
wow.
there's kind of an antibody reaction that occurs with a
Hmm.
certain type of bacteria from food poisoning. And so it's good to know that information. Like if you know you're going to be traveling or going to a buffet or something like that, to be mindful of what you're intaking. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's sort of like it sets you up with a bit of a predisposition to to future
exactly.
bouts. Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good to know. And now you mentioned earlier on about nutritional deficiencies or, not absorbing, like when you've got SIBO, small intestine's not absorbing the nutrients. And you said you wanted to come back and talk about that. So was this,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so going back to what we keep saying, sluggish thyroid, sluggish anything else. And so for right now, for this part of our conversation, we're going to talk about impaired digestive secretions, and that includes your stomach acid, your bile, and your enzymes, right? So all those three digestive secretions can be impaired in the body and lead to different forms of nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies. So like if your stomach acid is impaired, you could not be breaking down your minerals. And remember, you need things like selenium and iodine and iron and things like that for thyroid function, right?
Hmm.
You could also be impairing your ability to not absorb B12 because remember, in the stomach, we have this thing called intrinsic factor. And intrinsic factor gets released when you have enough stomach acid. And it's kind of, on and connecting the dots here. And so we need intrinsic factor in order to absorb our B12 in the small intestines. I mean, I could go on forever about this, right? This is what I geek out about every day. um, but, if we don't have proper bile coming from it's made in the liver, but moves to the gallbladder and comes out
Hmm.
into the small intestines. Bile is super important because it not only acts as an antimicrobial in the small intestines, but it
Hmm.
helps us emulsify and break down our fats,
Hmm.
including our fat soluble vitamins. We're talking about A, which is important for thyroid too, E, and D. We need D, obviously, to heal those tight junctions in the
Hmm.
intestinal tract, and it works as a hormone in our bodies. We need D to be happy and things like that. So, again, sluggish thyroid, sluggish bile, right? Or perhaps we have sluggish thyroid and now we have sluggish pancreatic enzymes.
Hmm.
Um, what did I just say?
Yeah, no, you said
Sluggish
that's right.
thyroid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
sluggish thyroid
enzymes. Yeah,
leading.
you've done the
Right,
bile, you've
right.
done the stomach acid. Yeah, you're right. You're onto it.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, then you're not breaking down your foods, and guess what happens when we don't break down your foods with proper amount of enzymes? you're creating this like food fodder that hangs out. It's like the sludge, I like to call it, that hangs out in the
Mhm.
small intestines. That's like prime feast for bacteria, right?
Uh-huh.
So we want to make sure
Yeah.
we've got awesome enzymes
Mm.
from the pancreas, but also in the brush border of the intestinal tract. So now I can't remember what your regional question was. I think it was about nutrient deficiencies, but
Mm.
that's how kind of thyroid and SIBO can kind of work
Mm.
together
Yeah.
in creating nutrient insufficiencies or deficiencies in the body.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense because if you don't have all of those um, secretions working properly in the gut, in
Yep.
your stomach, then yeah, it's just going to all the flow on effects from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Downstream
and then you're not
effects
going to
for
be able to
sure.
absorb, your food's not breaking down, so you're not going to be able to absorb it, and get all the goodness out of it. And so,
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Your
I can
bacteria will
see.
just take all of them. Your bacteria
Mm,
love to eat up your nutrients. So, going back to that motility and that cleansing wave of the migrating motor complex, you want all that stuff to be sweeping through and not settling there and taking up
mm,
real estate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if you're dealing with hypothyroidism and SIBO, you've got to be working on your thyroid function, don't you? Making sure you are taking the medication if you need it and getting that checked. And if that's not sufficient, trying other medications, or, if you don't need
Hmm.
medication, making sure all the other things that we talk about on this podcast all the time, that you're working on that. Because I imagine if your thyroid function isn't optimal, then the flow on for that is all of that motility issue. So you're going to be finding a very, very difficult SIBO battle if your thyroid function's not good.
100%. Yes, you said
Yeah.
it exactly right. And the other thing that I think we touched on this is the stress, right? So
Mm.
when we have elevated cortisol levels and things like that, that can affect that whole thyroid axis. And again, digestion. And so stress management is a really big part of the conversation.
Yeah,
Yep.
you said that that's often the tough love conversation that you have
Yep.
with your clients. So let's have some of that tough love conversation because look, we talk about stress. I'd say most episodes stress comes into into the conversation somewhere, but it's still the thing that I think we can possibly avoid having to deal with or just dabble in or not really address. So what's your tough love speech when it comes to give us your tough
Yeah.
love, Jen, when it comes to stress and and how that connects with what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't really tell someone who's super busy, like say you're a corporate person that's working, 80 hours a week. Or you can't really tell a mom who's got newborns at home, or anyone that's in a stressful situation or environment to just manage your stress. It doesn't work. What does that even mean, right? So what
Yeah.
I try to do is try to teach people, and this is kind of my own lifelong journey. I'm like a super type A, wound type overachiever, go getter type person. So this is really, I say these things out loud for my client, but also for myself, right?
Mm.
So finding really small moments in the day to turn off a little bit. So, say I'm at my desk and I've been working all day, I've been on Zoom calls, I have an office window, I can stare out into the distance. That can reprogram and set you back into parasympathetic.
Hmm.
Or between clients, so that I'm not, absorbing everyone's energy, I go outside and I do some qigong and I like get the energy out, right? Or I
Hmm.
play fetch with my dog and have a good time with him for 5 minutes. It's really about incorporating those really small moments of like turning yourself off or on. I guess how it depends on how you look at it, right?
Mm.
To reset. So maybe that looks like you go in your car on the way home, from your commute, and you turn the music up really loud and you just belt out the song. Like that singing can like help,
Yeah.
stimulate the vagus nerve, which is really
Hmm.
calming for the body. Just finding little things like that. Like for me, I have to have a hot Epsom salt soak at the end of the day. That's like my
Hmm.
time out, or I go play guitar. Having something creative that's outside of the hustle and bustle.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's really what I try to convey or teach my clients, that's going to be important for long term wellness and longevity, right? Because it's not practical, I don't think, for me to say to you, "Hey, Annabelle, I know you're super busy and you barely have time for our session this week, right? And I'm going to tell you, you need to meditate for 60 minutes every day." Like, that's just not practical,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, that would be great if we could do that. But the key is to figure out how to incorporate something in your unique life that's going to
Mm.
work for you to reduce your stress level. Now, having
Yeah.
said all of that, there are other things like, am I in an environment where there are toxins? Am I in a moldy home? Am
Mm.
I in a polluted urban atmosphere, right? Do I have clean water in my home to drink? What is the air quality? Things like that we need to think about. Am I slathering my body with perfumey lotions and using smelly detergents because I think they smell
Mm.
good, right? Those things are toxic to our body, and those toxins communicate a message of stress to our brain. So even though we think we're happy and we're not stressed, our
Mm.
body is receiving a physiological message that we are stressed.
Yeah.
So we can have an elevated cortisol level without even really thinking in our mind that we're stressed.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I've definitely discovered that for myself. I intellectually feel like I'm not stressed and not actually really feel stressed, but my body is stressed.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
Exactly.
really interesting. I've had to really learn that over time. Is that it's
Yeah.
not necessarily about how you feel in that, do I really feel uptight and wound up and stressed and like I can't take anything on and like on edge and hyped up? It doesn't have to be. It may not look like that for you.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It
it
may not.
doesn't,
And that's
yeah.
really
Yeah.
an important message to teach people, to kind of be in tune about
Mm.
all the aspects of their life,
Mm.
right? Not just about what might be happening at work or a conversation they had with their spouse or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know from you, like, what kind of things do you do to,
For stress, like in
yeah,
my
stress?
day. Look, I think some of it is um, probably I've been better at the last few years is not over scheduling, and because I do work from home by myself, I've got a fair amount of control over how I fill my day, and
Mhm.
so probably not overfilling my day is a key longer term strategy, and I appreciate, like, if you're working a full-time job and you've got, I mean, my kids are young adults now. One's got one more exam left and then he's finished school and then one's in uni and the other one's still got 2 more years of school left, but they're a very different stage to when my kids, I had 3 little boys running around and that was very busy, and I didn't cope very well then. So some of it I know for me is it's a stage of life thing as well. I've got more control over my own time than I did when the kids were littler. So that is easier. But I like to do jigsaw puzzles. That's something that I really like to
Oh,
do.
fun.
And often if I am busy or going through a more sort of generally stressful period, that's when I tend to get out the jigsaw. And it's just there. That's a nice mind relief for me.
That is really
So that's
great.
probably, and I feel like I'm doing something. I'm not very good with meditation. I've tried apps and I've tried, 1 minute meditations and 2 minutes. And like I've tried all of those. It just doesn't really, I think I've just decided, worked out it actually makes me more stressed. So it's not for
Yeah.
me. I do like to pray. Like I will pray. I've got that sort of spiritual connection. But I like the practical side of doing a jigsaw. I feel like I'm being somewhat productive, but it's
Mhm.
mindless in that sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a couple
I
of the
love
things that
that.
I like to do. Yeah.
I
Thank you
love
for
that.
asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do see that with myself, and also my son is kind of that type where he just like, "Mom, I can't sit down and do a meditation. Like, I would just go insane if I tried to do that," right? But, that's the thing. You have to find what works for you, right? Not everyone's
Mm,
going to be the same. Not everyone's going to want to do the 5-minute meditation every day.
mm,
Maybe it's working with your hands. Maybe it is doing a crossword puzzle or a
yeah.
jigsaw puzzle, or knitting or something like that, right? Or
Yeah, some
just,
of those craft, I was
listening to
about to
music.
say some
Yeah,
of that craft is, I used to as a
right.
little, younger person do lots of that craft. Even the Wordle, like in the family, we all do the Wordle for the day. Do you know about Wordle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. We all do that. Well, actually, most of us do the Wordle. Like, what you get the Wordle like? It's all of that, all the New York
Yeah.
Times little puzzles.
That was
So
really big during COVID.
it
Yeah.
was really big. So we've kind of stuck that out, but now we've got the connections and the mini crossword, and we just do the free ones, and and it's kind of a nice little banter within the house, a bit of competition, But
Yep.
it's a little bit of a mind break.
Yeah,
Um,
for
yeah,
sure.
so
Taking a
that's good.
break. Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Well, Jen, look, thank you so much for all that you've shared with us over the last little while. Lots to think about, lots for people to go away and reflect on and start actioning too, I think. But is there something I haven't asked you that you think you're thinking, come on, Annabelle, what you haven't asked me about this, or any lasting words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us?
I that's a really good question. Thank you for asking. I think mostly I would just encourage people to kind of find a moment. Um, because we're all so highly unique, like I've said, and as you know, and find a moment where you can just plug into your own intuition. I think that's going to lead you and take you the farthest. When we are listening to our soul, and not getting overwhelmed with Dr. Google and all the support groups and things like that are going on, I think we innately know what we need to heal our bodies, whether it's thyroid or SIBO or anything else. And, really just being in tune with what we need and then being brave enough and strong enough to ask for what we need, right? That's
Mm,
pretty huge.
yeah, it's hard.
I don't know about any other questions. I feel like I talked quite a bit and I hope everyone could follow along.
Yeah, I think you explained things really clearly. So yeah, no, I think that was really helpful. And so people want more of you. They want to work with you. What do you? How can people connect? What do you offer? Like, what do you? Tell us. Give yourself a plug,
Yeah.
and then people can
Yeah,
connect with
awesome.
you.
So you can go to my website. It's the SIBOcoach.com. There you'll find lots of information about me and my journey and the services that I offer. A freebie that any of your listeners can take advantage of is when I have an eating hygiene or a mindful eating PDF on there with a video. And, this is kind of, we didn't talk about this, but it's foundational for getting started on any kind of gut healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And can also be obviously helpful for those with thyroid conditions.
Hmm.
So that's free. You can download that and watch the video. And then there's also a SIBO questionnaire or a quiz on there, and that's
Ah.
also free. And they can
Hmm.
access that, answer the questions. It's quite comprehensive. It's more than what you would think than just digestive issues, but it gives
Mm-hmm.
us all clues of whether or not you may have SIBO or not, and then what to do next. So it includes how to contact me or how to order a test or whatever it is they need. And that's really the best way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, that's nice and easy to remember too. And obviously, I'll put all those links in the description below, but the SIBOcoach.com. And yeah, thank you. Yes, thanks, Jen. It's been really, an enjoyable conversation over something that can be, I know, kind of unpleasant for people to deal with. So I think it's been
Yeah.
good. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate the time that we could spend together.
This is your KISS Thyroid Coaching segment designed to get you just reflecting back on the conversation you've just heard. So, was there something that stood out for you that you need to take action on? If so, then you can probably stop now and go write that down in your thyroid notebook. Hopefully, you've got one, and take some action steps on it. If you're not too sure, I guess some of the things that I would say that could have come out of that is, if you've got some of these ongoing gut issues, like Jen mentioned, reaction to cruciferous vegetables, those FODMAP type of foods, then perhaps you need to find someone that can do the SIBO test, whether it's a medicine, whether it's your doctor or other health practitioner, and actually get tested for SIBO. That could be a good next step. Or perhaps you already know that you've got SIBO or you've had it in the past. So how did this, did you learn anything new? Was there something else that that's come up in the conversation that you would want to try as part of long-term maintenance, or if you have another flare, something that maybe you want to try differently. So again, grab that notebook and just jot a couple of things down for, next time, or another time, or, sometime down the track when perhaps your gut health isn't feeling so good. But I hope you found that encouraging. As always, there's lots of different proactive things we can do to look after our own health. So whatever you do, take action, but keep it super simple, and otherwise it gets all a bit overwhelming. So have a great day. Enjoy the next fortnight, and I'll be back with you again just before Christmas. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button, or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.